Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for another live stream with Phil and Cam. I'm Frederick. I'm joining you from hot and humid Hong Kong. Our topic of today, installing audio and video equipment can be very challenging, especially when unexpected issues pop up. So, Phil and Cam, I believe today we're doing a bit of a behind the scene on some of your recent projects. Is that right?
Yes. So what Cam and I talked about is over the last few months, we've been doing some pretty fun creative projects. And one of the projects was retrofitting or upgrading this military veteran's house for a TV show called Military Makeover. So we were given a certain amount of time, about 4 days,
Yep.
to try to put in a nice sound system. And we'll talk about why we chose Poke and some of the other components in the house. But along the way, we realized that there's a lot of these challenges that Cam and I came across, the average person does. So we're going to just kind of talk about how we planned it and all of the other things. So before we get started, producer Nick actually has a little teaser to kind of give you an idea of what we did. So Nick, fire away. So cool project, but there were some challenges. So when we found out about it, this house was in actually where was it, Cam? Way out in the middle of what was the city? Was it really a city?
Yeah, so it was a city. It was oh my gosh.
It was near. It was way outside of Scottsdale. No, way outside of Phoenix. No, where are we at? Tucson. There you go.
Outside of Tucson.
It was a suburb of Tucson, Arizona. And literally, it was 20 miles away from anything. Like when we were driving there, the navigation system told us to turn right and drive 5 miles. And we looked, and it was literally a dirt road. So it was 5 miles on a dirt road to get to this person's house. No cell phone coverage.
Nope.
Zero. No data from your phone, nothing. So very challenging location. So we knew that because this was out in the middle of nowhere, we needed to pre-plan for this. So the first thing was, let's talk about planning. Frederick, if I was going to ask you if you had someone in your home or wanted you to help them design a system and you wanted to make sure you had all the equipment, all the gear you needed, everything before you went to that person's house, would be some of the things that you would think about before you even went to the house, when you were thinking about purchasing and getting things?
Yeah, so you need, of course, to know where you're gonna route all the cabling and stuff. So is it made of wood construction? Is it adobe? Is it concrete? So you need to know what kind of conduits you need to run. Photos, of course, would be very useful to figure out a little bit about the environment, a blueprint, or something from an architect with some plans, that sort of stuff, I guess, right?
Exactly. And that's something that we want to make sure. If you ever have to do this, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So whether you're installing it or someone else is installing it, take some photographs of the spaces that you want to have the stuff put in, because they'll say, "Oh, I want to put a multi-channel system into a house." Well, where are the windows? How big where's the wall located? How much space do you have on the wall? Where am I going to run the wires? All that stuff can kind of be understood a little bit from photography and a tape measure. So have them measure out, the size. And we were lucky enough to get kind of a blueprint, a basic old blueprint of when the house was made, that kind of gave us an understanding of kind of the size of the room. And from there, then we could pick the proper kind of the proper products. So let's look at some of the things that we put into the room. So the goal was to give this person not only a good surround sound experience, but also give them good music throughout the house. Because if you go to Tucson, where this person was located, it's hot during the summer, but during the rest of the year, you can be outside all the time. Now we were lucky enough to be there. What month was that? May, April,
Uh,
May, and it was
somewhere around there.
yeah, and it was
And
only
I looked up the actual city.
uh
It is Vail,
Vail,
Arizona.
Vail,
that we're
Arizona.
at.
So we're talking. So it was in the 80s during the day. The cool thing about this was they redid this person's entire house.
Yeah.
So Cam, what did they do to the house?
Everything. No room was left untouched. They did every single room. So the bedrooms, the office, the living room, the kitchen, and then they even redid the outside. They redecked the outside, so they gave him a brand new deck. They made a little outside bar for the person with a little margarita mixer. Yeah, no room was left untouched. It was really really cool. And then of course we came in with Polk and some of our products, and we hooked it up with the audio, of course.
Exactly. So the whole premise was there was a veteran, and he's a military he's a retired vet, and they really wanted to take care of his home and upgrade it. So a lot of companies, Military Makeover is kind of think of it as a nonprofit, and a lot of companies came together to redo his house. And we're talking local landscapers, carpenters, electricians, furniture companies, windows companies, roofers.
Yep.
So they literally redid his entire house in probably a week and a half. So we had to work around not only, what we were doing, but there was electricians putting in new lights and new ceiling fans. They bought all new furniture for the entire house. Every room got all new furniture. They were building a deck. They were fixing the roof. They were redoing the entire driveway and all of the landscaping.
Oh yeah, the pavers
And the
everything.
pavers.
So we
And
couldn't
we
bring
had-
in gear at a certain time, so you had to hold off. Everybody had to work around each other.
Exactly. So we had to figure out a way to sort everything out. So we wanted to, and if you forgot something, it was literally an hour and a half drive to the latest electronics store or even Home Depot if you wanted to get something that you forgot. So the first thing we wanted to do was the living room. And as I mentioned, photography is important for doing the living room. So this is actually an example of what the final living room looked like. And we chose the Polk signature stuff for a couple of reasons. The first thing was it was the loudspeakers, the floor standers we chose, which ones, Cam? The 55s, I believe, or
Let me go and put these glasses back on because we went with the Signature Elite ES50s.
yeah, the ES50s. We chose those because they were a pretty narrow speaker. And this wall that the speaker sat on, there was windows on one side and a hallway leading to the front of the house on the other. So we worked with the designer to see how much room we had around the cabinet that they were putting in, because we didn't want the speakers to stick out into the room. So that was the first thing. Where are we going to put the speakers, and did we have room to put the speakers? So we measured all that out. Then we had and what you ended up with was a system that tucked neatly into the locations that we wanted. Even the center channel, which I think is an ES35.
Yep, Signature Elite
Um,
ES35.
We chose that center channel because it was slim enough that it would fit on the shelf
Matter of fact, it's
inside
here in front
of the
us.
cabinet. So you can see it. Cam actually has it over here. So I love this center channel, and because like most of our brands have a center like this, but these slim center channels are great to fit under a television. Most of the time, the center channel sits on top of the cabinet with the TV, and that won't block the picture. We wanted to fit it, if you look at the picture, into a shelf.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. And then we utilized two um, Polk subwoofers. Hey, Frederick, let's talk a little bit about why you want to utilize multiple subs instead of one in a living environment. What's one of the benefits of doing that?
Yeah, that's a good point. A single subwoofer will only have bass from a specific area, and it's hard to figure out is that the right place to put it, because in that area it might be okay, but in other places of the house or even inside that listening room, there may be a null or there may be a peak because of it. So using several subwoofers in several places will help you to fill up the bass in those where you would have a null, or you can like mitigate it better. There's
Exactly.
calibration, of course, but the better the more the better, of course.
Exactly. But now the sub you're looking at in front of us is what is which size is that one? It's a 10, right?
10-inch, I
That's a
think. Yeah.
12. The one in front of us is a 12.
Well,
The ones that we bought were eights. And the reason why we picked the eights were not only do you get more even bass, but they're more compact. So if you look at where we put the one next, there was one in the front of the room and one next to the couch. So we wanted to make it not an we wanted great sound, but we didn't want the boxes to be too big, because there was designers involved in this as well. So we wanted to make sure that everything blended in. So we looked at the space based on the photographs, based on where we could possibly put speakers, and then we picked the products that we wanted, and we ordered the proper Signature Elite products. Now, Cam,
Yes, sir.
what else that we have to order to go along with what we were talking about today? Because if I just buy you these electronics, is that going to actually? But don't even worry about that. What are the other things that we had that you had to go to Home Depot and
Oh,
you had to order from other companies in order to make this work?
oh, you're talking about the support gear.
The support gear, because while we want you to buy our products,
Sure.
it's our products still. In order for it to work, you want to have the support gear, right?
Right.
So, what are some of the other things that I had you run around
Right.
and get in order to make this happen?
Well, like we were talking about when we first started this, the home was in a Adobe home, so we weren't trying to drill into his walls and run cabling and speaker cable and wires in his walls and destroy his beautiful walls there. So we actually decided to actually hide the speaker cable within channels instead. So those of you that may know, one of the good solutions for something like that is CordMate, and they have this wire mold with it that they call it, and it's essentially let me take it out. Essentially, it's just a nice little channel. They can stick your speaker cable, and that's not going to show up very good on camera.
Yeah.
But it's a hollow PVC pipe.
With some stickers, with a sticker on it.
Yeah,
So,
that
so
that you can stick to a wall. You stick your speaker cable in there and stick that up against a wall or baseboard, and that hides your speaker cable within it. And what's really cool about this one, made by CordMate in particular, and the one similar to it, is that it's white, so it's going to match most walls. But if it doesn't, if you have a colored wall, this is textured and it's made so it's able to be painted. So it'll blend into your wall and it kind of disappears.
yeah, so one of the reasons why. So let's talk about this, Frederick. Most of the time in the U.S., running wires in a wall is pretty. It's not. It can be difficult, because you have to fish it between the behind the drywall. But tell me about your apartment. Can I fish wires in your apartment very easily?
Um, no. Well, yes, there is one particular place for communications, so that would be a LAN cable or something. But I'm personally not able to run. I'm actually renting too, so that's another additional obstacle.
Uh-huh.
So I actually use some similar kind of trunk, adhesive trunks, if you can call them that, to put both signal wire and speaker wire.
Mhm.
And that helps me to put it right above the plinth. So you have the floor, there is a plinth on it, and then right above it is like space where you can sort of level the cables in that trunk, and that is painted indeed in the same color as the floor tile, so it's less obvious.
Yeah.
But other than that, if you really want to do a remake, and some people do that, to have bought their apartments, they will use the gear to like literally cut into the walls a slit so that you can put the trunking in it and then rewire the whole thing where the cable should be coming out for example, surround speakers or even ceiling speakers.
So what they did in this house was, if you go back and you look at the wall where the TV is located, they actually built a false wall. The house was made out of adobe, 3-foot thick adobe, so which is basically concrete. So you were not going to run wires through these walls. So if you have someone that has like this type of home, or like you said, Frederick, you're renting and you don't really want to cut into a rental property, or the house is built from on cinder block, or it's a cinder block basement or whatever, there's we wanted to hide everything. So by building kind of this wall, number one, it allowed them to mount the TV. Number two, it allowed them to hide the wires running to the TV. And by the way, we also hit the wires that ran up into the ceiling and out to the multi-zone behind this wall. And in the cabinet, we put in an AVR to run this system, and a multi-zone Marantz M4 to run the outside. So very, very clean looking installation. Excuse me, I have a lingering cough, so if I start coughing, I'll throw it the camp. So this made for a really clean installation. The interesting thing when I saw this was there's an AVR in this cabinet, and the doors are closed, right? So at first I was worried, okay, what is this person's source going to be? And we talked to them, and they said the majority of what they watched was the apps built into their smart TV. And because the smart TV had ARC on it, and the receiver had CEC, there was really no reason to open that cabinet. So once we made sure that the ARC was enabled on the AVR, the CEC was enabled on the AVR and on the TV, they can just grab their TV remote control, and when they turn on the TV, the receiver turned on, turn off the TV, the receiver turned off. They could turn up the volume, and then all of their sources, their Netflix, their Hulu, and all of their Disney and everything else came from the TV. So really, really simple. Now, if they had sources, then it becomes a little challenging. So Frederick, say I had this cabinet, and in that cabinet, I had an AVR and a Blu-ray player and a Roku. What can I do for that? What would you do?
Yeah, and that actually ties in when someone's asking Dirty Films, can the remote go through the cabinets? So yes, you could use a universal remote control, or you could use infrared flashers. You can use the HEOS app for us to switch sources and things like that. So there's several ways of going about. It depends on what you prefer to use, and it depends on how many sources you need to. If it's only 1 or 2 sources, then you may not need to go through the whole hassle of installing external flashers, infrared flashers, and things like that.
Yeah. So for example, and I like the way you put it. So let's look at it multiple ways. Like you mentioned, you have a few sources. Say you had a Roku, right? You could use the Roku app to control that. If you have an Apple TV, you could use the Apple TV app on the phone to control that. The other way would be if you go to Amazon or any of the major electronics ones. What's the big one in Asia right now that you can get small electronic stuff?
Yeah, there's plenty of brands out there, and you have on Tobo, you have Shopee, Lazada,
Exactly.
all these networks, that sort of stuff.
So what you would look for is a IR repeater system, and basically what it is, it puts a little flasher on the front of your AVR, and then that little flasher goes into a little box, and then it repeats that code into the rack. So if you wanted to, you could pick up each of the remote controls and do that. It's getting to the time now that most of the time you'll probably have a disc player and you'll probably have a streaming player as your primary sources besides the ones that are built into your TV. So you could use that type of system. There's also some inexpensive, as you said, control systems that I just got one. It was called um, a sofa baton or something like that. It's a very inexpensive remote that it's a Wi-Fi remote
Right.
that transmits to a small little box, and
Right.
then that box has flashes on it.
Oh,
And I think we'll look it up. It's called Sofa Baton. I think the whole system was like in the US, it was like 150 bucks
yeah.
or something like that. So
Reasonable.
it wasn't too crazy of a solution. So yeah, with a B, Sofa Baton. Let's see if we can
Yeah,
look
even
that up.
Logitech used to have a universal. You
Yeah,
could
there we go.
program it. Philips
So
and Marantz used to have it too.
exactly. So yeah, so Sofa Baton, yeah, that's like 199. So
Okay.
if you go and just do IR repeaters, or is probably the easiest way to do it. Or like I said, most of the time, most of the sources now are either built into an Apple. Most people are using an Apple TV or Roku or something like that for the majority of their stuff, and all of those have a Wi-Fi app. As long as you have, so you can keep the doors closed. But this was really simple. It was just the TV, and the TV, they were using all the apps off of the TV and the Hios app. So there was really no need to reach into to open that door for most of the applications that we're doing. Okay,
So
so
Phil, I got a question for you. If
uh
the doors are closed, and since you're in Arizona in the desert, in summer can get pretty hot. So did you guys install any cooling or some fan system on the back of the cabinets or so?
well, because that's a good question. Like in my home, because I have a giant rack of Marantz and everything else, it does get awfully hot, and I'm running fans. We I
Arizona homes got AC. They
Yeah,
don't sit inside a hot house.
yeah. So the outside
That
temperature.
works.
The funny thing about it was the reason why the house is made out of Adobe is because the Adobe did a really good job
Yeah.
keeping the heat out of the house. We were
Yeah.
quite surprised
It wasn't
how
hot in there at
even
all.
though the air conditioning wasn't, we
Yeah.
had the doors open
Yeah.
most of the time, and the house was probably in the low 70s
Yeah, it
most of the
was
time.
reasonable. And keep
Yeah.
in mind, we were there with people working, doors open all the time, people going in and out. And that home, because of the walls and its construction, kept that home reasonable.
Reasonable.
And
Now,
they even installed a big, especially in that area, they installed a brand new overhead fan that is made to circulate air in that area. So they even got a brand new fan
Yeah.
just to move air
Yeah.
through that area.
yeah, so you could use a ventilation system.
Sure.
We cut the back of the cabinet out, by the way.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
because number one, it allowed us, the AVR was a certain thickness, and the multi-channel amp was a certain thickness, and by the time you tried to run the wires to it,
Yeah.
it wouldn't fit in the cabinet. So first we cut a little opening, and just realized let's cut a bigger opening in the back of the cabinets, that kind of reinforced cardboard that was in
Yeah.
the back of the cabinet. And because we took that out, it probably helped the ventilation
Sure. Yeah.
substantially. So that was actually a good thing. Now, when we go back to this channel, there's multiple types of channel. This plastic channel.
Yep.
The channel has an adhesive on it. This channel wouldn't work for what we were doing
Yeah, that's
because
single cable.
we used the house is made out of Adobe, and the biggest challenge was getting the wires to the back of the room. The front of the room was easy because if I go back to my drawing here, the speakers in the center channel were sitting right next to
Right.
the cabinet. Easy installation, right? The subwoofer in the front sitting right next to the cabinet. Easy installation. Easy to hide the wires.
Yep.
In the back of the room,
Different story.
different story, because now we have a speaker sitting in the back of the room and a subwoofer sitting in the back of the room. So we need a channel that was big enough to hold the speaker wire and a subwoofer cable to run to the back of the room. So we had to go get a bigger version of this channel.
All right.
What we use to run the wire to the back of the room is there's different types of, think of it speaker wire. And sometimes when you look at speaker wire, normally you just see two wires. Think of it as red and black, right? Your plus and minus. When it comes to custom install wire, you can get what's 4-conductor wire. So what you'll see in there is what? Red, white, black, and green.
Yep.
Right? So what we did was that allows us to run one wire that has both channels to the back of the room. It really cleans up and simplifies the installation. And it reduces the amount of wire. Instead of running, 2 wires 50 feet, we run one thicker wire 50 feet. And then we took the red and white and made it the left side, and the green and black and made it the right side. So one 14-4 or 4-gauge wire and a subwoofer cable. And Cam bought, you bought cable that can be terminated, right? You didn't buy just an actual
Right, for the
subwoofer.
subwoofer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we made our own subwoofer cable so we could cut it to our custom length. So it was the exact length that we wanted to get it to where we wanted.
Yeah.
So-
And you could utilize, by the way, if you go to a hardware store, you'll see coax cable, and you could actually get if you get good quality coax cable, you can actually cut and terminate that, and then put on RCA jacks. It's actually quite simple, and they have all the tools at Home Depot or at any hardware store if you want to make your own subwoofer cable. Now, real sub cables are going to be better. You're less likely to get hum and buzz, but if you really want to cut them to a certain length, and you're on a budget, you can use coax. And most of the time, you can get away with not much hum. So we have to get a bigger channel. The problem with the channel is adhesive, and it had to go under you have to go from the rack under a set of stairs and around to the back of the room. And I didn't want people to kick it off. So what we did was, the house was made out of adobe, which is basically concrete. Once we got the wire once we put the channel up, we put in a couple of, think of them like concrete anchors to kind of keep it stuck to the wall. And then and that way it was nice and clean. And it was only like this, a few inches thick. It's probably a foot, an inch, or, maybe 10 centimeters. It wasn't very big of a piece. And it allowed us to run all the channels. Made for a very clean install. And if they ever want to take it off, they could easily take it off.
Zip.
The other thing, Frederick, have you ever seen the flat wire? Like, you could buy kind of flat wire for these types of applications. Actually, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to stop. I'm going to change my stop extending, and I'm going to.
Yeah, there's like a popular brand, Nordost. They use some of their cables are flat cables as well for speaker wire, so that's much easier to install because it obviously takes less space. You can put them under carpets.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
So
speaker cable works great in certain scenarios.
So I'm just gonna. So now I'm on Amazon, and like I said, I just picked Amazon because that's the big one in America.
Yeah, we use that too, by the way.
So we use that too.
Yeah. So if I go to flat speaker wire, that's not flat speaker. Flat
Yeah,
speaker
that's funny.
wire, right? This is an example. So there's some really cool. This one right here is a really slick one. We should have bought that, Cam. Look at that. You just so there are some ways that you can actually. This is actually stuck to the wall and painted.
It's crazy.
So there's lots of options for that, because that's the biggest challenge when it comes
Let's say
to
it's 16 gauge.
16 gauge. When it comes to running, this is normally the type that you normally would see, something like a cable like this guy here, where you could actually run that against the wall and then put a baseboard on.
That's
So
what I thought you were
a lot of
talking
times they'll
about.
run it along the wall, and then you get a baseboard, and there you can buy baseboards that have a little bit of a bump off.
Right.
Of course, it's better to run it through the wall, but sometimes you just don't have that application. And when we're talking about wire, when I say 4-conductor, 14-4. So something like this. where if you look at the wire, you'll see that there's 4 wires in a tube. And it comes in these big spools, which makes it really, really easy to run it long distances. So a lot of times you may only get 2. This is 4. So we use this all over the house because it was a lot easier to run 1 wire to the back of the house than it was around the house than it was to run 2. It's a much neater installation.
Yeah, there's a couple of disadvantages with flat wire as well. Some of them are solid core.
Mhm.
It's a solid piece of metal, and some are stranded.
Mhm.
The solid core easily breaks if it's too thin.
Uh-huh.
So sometimes in these cases where you need turning around a lot, you're better off just getting stranded because it's a bit more
Flexible.
solid
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
flexible.
I like the 14.4 in the conduit. Just make sure that you have enough space.
Mm.
Cam actually has used this around our office. We
Yeah.
just put in kind of a lounge up here, and the boss man wanted a big system ran, and he didn't want it, so he had to hide all the power cords and everything else, and he utilized this as well. So conduit is your friend. So run it through the walls is would be great.
Yep.
That's the best way.
So my
And
house is
Normally up and down the wall, up and down is normally pretty easy because if you look in drywall, you have framing in it. So you could grab where's those rods? So if Cam don't you if you can just hold the whole thing up.
Oh.
So you could buy something like these. These are called fish
What camera
rods.
am I going to?
Fish rod. Just hold it in front of you.
Oh.
Fish rods. And then you can use that to fish the wire up your wall. I've done it with a hanger.
These rods are made out of fiberglass, so they're made to bend. And what's cool about this one has a little light on the end so you could see where you're going through the wall. And then it has a hook. You're absolutely not going to be able to see this. Oh, yes, you can.
Yeah.
It has a little hook on the end as well.
Yeah.
But as you can see,
Yeah.
fiberglass, so it bends as you go through the wall.
So if you were going to run something in a wall, especially like say I ran into the back of the room and I wanted to put speakers on the walls, that's how you can get the speaker up the wire up the wall. Getting it, you can also use them to run them to the from the front of the room to the back of the room. It all depends on how easy it is based on whether or not your beams go this way. So they say this is the front of the room and this is the back of the room. If the beams go this way, it's a lot harder than if the beams go that way. So for most people, the quickest way, if you're trying to get into this and you don't want to really dig into your walls and you just want to make it look good and simple, would be the conduit approach. Because a lot of times people see the rears, and one of the biggest objections with buying a multi-channel system is running the wires to the back of the room. And we're just here to tell you that I don't care if your house is made out of 3-foot thick concrete, there's a way to run it back there and make it still look nice and appealing, and you could do it yourself. Just a quick trip to the hardware store to do that. Now, of course, you got to make sure when you go to hardware store, how much that you buy enough wire for all these projects, and we'll show you some of the other projects because we had to buy a lot of wire. Now, that was one room. The next room was he had an office, right? And he runs a nonprofit. And because he had an office, he wanted to have a little system in the office. And the nice thing is not everything has to be wired from one room to another. So we went with, in that room, a Denon home amp and a pair of smaller. Which ones were the pokes that we chose?
We did the Signature Elite ES 10s, the smaller version
of the 10s, and we threw another 8-inch poke subwoofer in this room. It sounded gigantic, but it tucked right into his desk. So he can sit on his desk, and he literally had a 2.1 100-watt per channel hi-fi system on his desk. And it sounded absolutely amazing because both the AVR and the Denon home amp were both HEOS. He could play music not only in his living room, he can also play it. He can sync it to music in his office. This also allowed him to, he could plug this into his laptop, he can Bluetooth to it. There was a lot of different things. So this was a nice little simple system that we actually added. Now, this was really quick. The one that became a challenge and took most of our time was actually the backyard. So that the house had at least a couple of acres of the backyard. It was big. They had a chicken coop and all these different spaces.
Chickens, ducks.
Yes. So we wanted to come up with a way to do his backyard. And remember, this is Arizona. So while we were there, it was 80s in the summer, it could be 110, 115.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So we wanted to make sure that the room that we had enough that we had rugged enough stuff. So the polk atriums are what we chose. And we used the polk atrium garden sats or sats.
We did the Polk Atrium SAT 300s,
Mhm.
and then we did the Polk Atrium 8 SDIs that you can see up top. And then, of course, you can't have a good system without having a subwoofer out there. So, of course, we did the Polk Atrium Sub 100 that you see there in that terracotta color
Yeah.
right there.
So because the backyard was so big, we actually put in 3 zones. Actually, yeah, 3 zones. There was
Yeah.
one for his he had a covered patio for his master bedroom.
Yep.
He had a covered patio where people ate. Actually, how many speakers you put in there?
It
Covered
was-
patio where people ate.
yeah, 3 zones, because right outside his bedroom,
Uh-huh.
and then
His
right
main
when you come
deck.
out from the living room, and then kind of off to the side where they put that little
Barbecue?
margarita barbecue area.
Okay. And then we put speakers on a new deck that they built.
Yep.
So so one of the reasons why we do this is people go, well, why did you use so many speakers? Well, if you have 2 speakers trying to fill a large area, what you end up doing is you have to play it really loud. So say I had 2 speakers in the awning above, and I wanted to hear it out on the patio on the deck, I would have to play it extremely loud so I can hear it on the deck. Number one, that the people sitting there would not be comfortable, and you may upset your neighbors. So what we did, if you look at the picture, was the speakers fired back towards the house. So if he was playing something, it wasn't firing out toward the neighbor.
Right.
So that way
That'd be
he could
rude.
just bring up the deck if he's on the deck,
Right.
or he could bring up the speakers next to his the barbecue and play it there, or the speakers next to his master bedroom, and it would sound good and he would not disturb the neighbors.
Right.
Now, it was a lot of power, and if you turn it all on, it
Sure.
rocked, right? And of course we hung out with the military guys after every night and tested the system. So it was a nice little combination of satellite speakers and traditional architectural speakers that are water resistant and weatherproof, and then a subwoofer. And we put the subwoofer under the deck. So when you were on the deck, you get a little. It was pretty cool because the deck actually reinforced the base. Now, the other one that was really quick was in the bedrooms. We had 2 bedrooms, and because we had 2 bedrooms and they had TVs, and those TVs had ARC, we put in 2 sound bars. So one was a regular Polk Magnify Mini, and the other one was a Signa
S4.
S4. So those were just simple, just so they had music throughout the house. Now, let's talk about we already talked about some of the challenges of doing something like this. And the first thing, of course, is, as we mentioned, what is the room going to look like and how are we going to run the wires? So, and we had to make sure that, remember, we didn't want to make trips to Home Depot.
Nope.
And we had to have enough wire to run everything in the inside plus everything in the outside. So, Cam, how much wire did you have to get?
Lots. Rolls.
What?
I sent. So I sent pallets there,
Uh-huh.
multiple pallets, and on those pallets I had multiple spools of wire. Um, Both the ones of 4 wire, the ones that you just talked about, where within one's speaker cable had 4 strands of wire, the red, black, white, and green. And then also I sent multiple spools of just the one that just had the regular 2 strands of wire, because I wasn't sure where we're going to be running wire, what type I wanted to use, because I wasn't 100% sure what the actual layout was going to be once we landed. We had a general idea, but I wanted to be prepared for any scenario. So I'm one of those guys. I like to be over prepared versus under prepared, and then now I'm running off somewhere to go get stuff because I didn't anticipate something.
Yeah, because the goal is not to have to go to Home Depot or not to have to go to the hardware store over and over and over again. So the biggest challenge when it came to this whole project was that took the most time, and it actually was actually, if I looked at it, setting up the speakers in the front, super quick, right? And the if you look at the interior, strip the wires, put the wires in the right thing, cut them to the right distance, put the center to the put the center channel in the shelf, left channel, right channel, the subwoofer in the front, super fast, right?
Sure. It was more the stopping and going and stopping and
And
going,
going
but the
exactly
actual action of doing it,
was
yeah,
fast.
fast.
The thing that took the most time in the interior was running the channel to the back of the room for the rear surrounds
Yeah.
and the and the subwoofer. Now the question was, people said, well, what about heights? Because we could,
Well,
because we're poke, we could bring everything. The
well,
issue with the house was it was Adobe
yeah.
and the ceiling was exposed beam and it was vaulted. So because it was vaulted, while Signature does make a Atmos height speaker,
Sure.
the vault would not have worked because the way that a height speaker works is it gives you a certain range of height. I think it's like 8 to 12 feet. How high your ceiling has to be, because the speaker sits at an angle, and the goal is to ricochet the sound off the ceiling, and so you hear a sound coming from a particular location. As the ceiling gets higher, it starts to kind of eliminate or reduce the impression of that effect. And because the ceiling is angled,
Right.
where it was directing the reflection was away from the
Yeah.
listener. So even though we made a height speaker
Yep.
for this particular application,
Yeah.
a traditional height speaker would not have worked. We could have put in heights, but the challenge of
Mm.
running that, and oh, by the way, open
Mm-mm.
exposed open beam ceiling, they
Mm-mm.
didn't want to have a lot of wires up there. So we're trying to make it as
Yeah.
clean as possible. And remember, we only had what, a day and a
It
half
wasn't
theoretically.
enough. This too
Yeah.
too much in too little time.
Yeah. Now the tip, another tip number one, two. They said, hey, the shoot is on Friday, so why don't you guys come in on Thursday and set everything up? We got there on Tuesday. And the reason why we did that is even though you plan, when you get there, the plans never seem to be the plans,
Nope.
you know? So the first day was just scoping out what we had, what we're gonna do, what did we forget, and then the next day was running the wires on Wednesday, and then Thursday was the final wiring, and we didn't finish really till you had already flown out on
I
Friday
flew out to go to a different
to a
trade
different
to a
event,
trade
and
show.
I was
I
still
had
on my
another
back,
event.
covered in dirt,
He was by
wiring
himself.
wiring the subwoofer in the patio. So it's always seems to take a little bit longer than desired. So we're in the
So
speakers
did
in the
you
back of the room. When you look
did
at
you
the
ins-
huh?
sorry, Phil, did you end up installing ceiling speakers at all? You could have perhaps used
We
the
did not.
atriums.
We were talking
Okay.
about going back and installing them. The problem is you can't use a traditional in ceiling because there's no ceiling that you can cut into. So probably what you would have to use would be something like an angleable. If you look at the speaker we put in the in the uh in the backyard, this
Yeah.
atrium, probably would have
Yeah,
been the best
exactly.
way to do this, because
Yeah.
then we could angle, even though the angle of the it was an odd angle in the ceiling, we could use something like this. So you would have to use an open beam, a couple of something like this to angle them down to the listener. Now, it would have
Okay.
been a challenge because I guess we could have ran the wires up back behind the TV. Yeah, we could have ran them up back behind the TV and
Sure.
then up the walls and all the way over.
Yeah.
But it would have been a
Not
challenging
not
thing.
in that window though. Not in that window of
Not in the
time.
window of time.
That'd be a
It'd be a day. It'd
y-
be a
can,
day.
can we come back type thing.
Yeah, and we may come back. Now, after talking to you, Frederick, I may go back because he has a bunch of his buddies are all electricians and stuff like that, and they like the project so much that they want to wire his garage and some other places around his house. So when we go back, we may go back and hang out with those guys and actually put the heights in, because we put in a what receiver did we use, a 3800.
Glasses.
So we definitely have enough power, enough channels to actually do it. But you have to use something like one of these atrium speakers in order to probably do that. So if you have a vaulted open beam ceiling, that would be the way. Now, you got to get the wife to approve, because the ceiling is natural wood and you got this black thing hanging up there, or a
No,
white
you
thing
called it.
hanging up
It's
there.
the AVR X3800H.
Yeah. So that would be something you'd have to consider. But
But
what
you
I
can
will tell
paint them
you
as
right,
well, the
huh?
atriums.
Say
You can
again?
paint them as well.
Yeah, you could paint them. Or you can, most of the like Bowers has some really nice ones you could actually paint, you know. The other way, which would be really cool, I didn't even think about it, is we have these little signature the garden sats. You can actually set them so they hang like pendulums. We actually have them in our building. We have 77 of these little garden sats around the building
What
for
is a
our
garden
background
sat?
music. These, the Sat 300s, the little
That's a
satellite
that's an
speakers.
Atrium Sat 300.
Yeah, the ones that are all, we got 77 of them hanging from the ceiling in the building.
Well, I heard you say
Yeah.
garden sat, so you
So
threw me
so
off.
what you can do is it comes with a pendulum mount, so they hang
Gotcha.
like a light. So that would actually, I think you would probably get a higher approval from the spouse that way. And
Oh.
they come with an earth tone. So it's kind of like an earth tone, which probably would
Oh.
have blended with the ceiling. And it would have looked awfully stylish. So you probably
Right?
so yeah, that would be, if I was gonna do a vaulted ceiling,
Oh, that's kinda
exposed beam
slick.
vaulted ceiling, that would be a really cool
That's
way
kind of slick.
of doing heights.
Yes, sir.
And the funny thing is, we brought enough to do that. I'm glad I didn't think about it while we were there. We'd still be under
Yep,
that
we'd
house.
still be over there.
Yeah. So challenges. So in the backyard,
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
the biggest challenge for the backyard, this took the most time. It literally took a day and a half to run the backyard, because remember,
Oh,
we
yeah.
wanted to put all of the outdoor zones have to be wired, right? Indoor, we can use wireless speakers, like maybe a Denon Home 150, 550s, 150s, a 350, a 250. Outdoors, you need to run the wires to the speakers, right? So how do you run
Uh,
the wires to in the backyard across, and like literally
uh,
multiple zones, and then out there? The hardest part was getting the wire out of the building. So if you look behind Cam, we mentioned there's that wall there.
Yeah.
In that rack next to the AVR, below the AVR, you can't really see it in this drawing, is where we put the M4. And we chose an M4 because we wanted at least 3 zones. And an M4 has 4 by 100. We could have done 3 Denon Home amps, but just for simplicity, we used an M4. And then what we did was we ran we took that 14.4, and we ran 3 of them up the wall and out of the house. And out of the house, by the way, remember, the walls are 3 foot thick. And I couldn't do it. Thank goodness there was an electrician there, and he actually sorted it out. He found like this little opening where the wall was only 6 inches thick, and then he ran the wires out to the deck, and then Cam took the wires from the deck, and then we just traced it along the wall
mhm.
to each speaker. So the way that we did this was, if you look at there was 4 wires in the for each zone. So basically it was 4 wires. So there was 3 wires, had 4 connections on them. Red, white, actually red, white, green, and black, like Cam mentioned, right? Once we got those out there, we ran it to the first speaker in that of the 2 speakers that would make up a zone. The red and white plugged directly into the speaker that was sitting there. Then we took another set of speakers, speaker wire, 2 wire, and took the red and black and ran that to the next speaker. So that prevented us from having to run. If we have 3 zones, you would have to run 6 wires out of the house. And by doing it this way, we only had to run 3 wires out of the house, and then one of the drones, it was like 150 feet away.
Yeah.
So when it came out, we ran 150 feet of the 4 conductor, and then when we got to where we needed to go, we only need to run another 20 feet of the 2 conductor to finish the job. Much cleaner. And we had to dig a trench along the ground, and we ran the wire as direct burial, which means if you look at the wires that you get from Amazon and stuff like that, look for wire that's direct burial. And there's also wires that are rated for in wall. We bought the direct burial stuff so we could just dig a trench in the desert, in the clay, and then we ran it, and then we buried it. And then we ran it up a post. So if you look at the pictures, there's these posts here. We ran the wire up the post to where the speakers were going to go. So that's how we actually got the wires there. On the deck, what we did was those were easier. We ran the wires, the wire that came out of the house was high. So we ran it down the post,
Right.
and then under the deck. And then the wire came up under the deck for the satellites that were sitting on the deck, and then the subwoofer was under the deck, so you didn't even see it. So pretty cool.
And yes, we did use dielectric grease, so no water intrusion got into any of the
So let's talk
connections
about
or
that.
anything like that.
Let's talk about that. So Cam's the next helicopter mechanic. So he was like adamant about, what do you call it, dielectric grease, right?
Yeah,
so what does it
dielectric
do it again? So
grease.
explain what that does.
So it just prevents any of your open connections. It just seals it all from the environment. So no water intrusion, no debris. It doesn't allow any of your
Corrosion.
your wires to get corrosion or anything like that.
Mhm.
So if you feel anywhere that you have exposed wires with dielectric grease, like where you made your connections, or heaven forbid you had to splice something, you fill that up with dielectric grease, it's going to prevent anything from corroding.
Yeah. So you can look here. You can see it. I just went over to Amazon, so you could see it here. So yeah. So this is what he actually used, was just a little bit of this little grease that you just put around the around where the electrical connections are, keeps them from corroding for many years. So first thing, we got the wires done. We're like, yay, we get the wires done. Then we realized that, and guess what? We have 4 zones. Actually, more than that. We have the office, the main room, 3 zones outside, 5 zones. And we're like, wow, we got 5 zones. And to start, and eventually you're just going to add den and home 150s and things like that. We go, great. Now we just grab the Helios app. But then we realize the house is made out of, first thing, 3-foot thick concrete, and we're in the middle of nowhere. Like literally, your cell phone did not work. It was a brick. There was you couldn't make a call. You'd have to drive 10 minutes to get to the point where your phone worked.
Yeah, you had to go down that dirt road to get some reception.
Exactly. So we were like, okay, well, how are we going to do this? And so of course, when you're off the grid, that's where something like a Starlink comes in. So the owner actually had one of these Starlinks, which is the satellite services, high-speed satellite services, where basically It's a little box, it's a little satellite that sits on that a little receiver that sits on top of the house, and then the Starlink grabs the internet. So that actually worked really well. We actually
Yeah.
had the Starlink, and then you could log in and actually check your email and stuff like that. Now, so the whole kit is what we used here. Now, not every most people are not going to be this off the grid.
Right.
So between most people are not going to have this Wi-Fi problem, but this Starlink is what we use to get the Wi-Fi in the room. The next thing is how do you get around the house? So Frederick, what are some options to extend Wi-Fi in a home? Because there's lots of ways to do
Yeah, several ways, and not all of them are a good idea. Like using extenders,
it.
not a good idea. Using the extenders that you plug in into the outlet that supposedly will inject it into the electrical system, not a good idea either. The best way to go specifically for HEOS is a mesh system. So there's a couple brands out there that have mesh systems. One popular in Asia is ASUS,
Uh-huh.
Wasek in Chinese. There's a couple like Netgear.
Mhm.
And the advantage of that is you have different hotspots. So you basically extend the network by adding an additional router that will extend your mesh. So in my case, I have a 800 square foot flat. I use one main router in the main living room.
Mhm.
I have an additional one in the office, which is right next to it. And I run a LAN cable in between. And then the master bedroom is a bit too far for more wiring. So that one is wirelessly connecting to the one in the office and extending the mesh that way. So that's the perfect way to make sure that your HEOS network is running flawlessly in every corner of the house, so to
Exactly.
speak.
So if we go back to this is what's called a Wi-Fi extender. These ones with the antennas. Never, ever, 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 ever use one of these, right? The problem with this really slows down your network. It really slows down the internet. Your system sees it as another network. So it just adds, it's just not worth the problem. So these types of extenders are not something you should use at all, right? So what he was talking about is a mesh network. So you can actually buy these little boxes. You have a router, and then this would plug into the Starlink, and then you can continue to add additional modules based on the room that you're in. So, for example, we were talking to the Best Buy guys, and there was this one Best Buy that was what, an hour and a half. It was like an hour, maybe at least an hour and 15 minutes away
To the Home Depot.
to the Best Buy.
Oh, to the Best. Yeah, the Best Buy was the journey.
It was like an
I'm
hour and
guessing it
10
was
minutes
at least an
away.
hour.
But that was the closest Best Buy to all of these guys. And they were like, oh, yeah, they do a lot of these mesh networks for these big ranches. And they were like, with putting these in the proper location, 4 of these Orbeez was enough to do like a square mile, like over a square mile, you know? So now there's different levels of these. They are more expensive. You can get them from companies like Google, Asus, Netgear, and things like that. But this was the best way to do it because then I can put one in the main room. We could put one kind of in the hallway. We could put one in the back of the house and get the coverage we needed. Because if you're thinking about this, right? If you're outside and you're relaxing on your deck and you're drinking your little cocktail, you want your heels to work. You want to be able to bring up the
Yeah.
song and play that
What you
song
do.
on the deck, which means you got to not only have coverage in the house, but you also have to have coverage outside.
Yeah.
And remember this: how Wi-Fi does not want to go through 3 feet of concrete. So just making sure that it worked properly. Another thing too is, Frederick, does line of sight impact Wi-Fi? By the way, remember how we had that conversation?
Yes, and also water. So if you have an aquarium or you have a lot of people, we have a lot of cases where we set up something, it works flawlessly, and then when everyone is inside that particular venue, all of a sudden it no longer works. So line of sight and water
Uh-huh.
and we're made up of 80% of water, so people also go for that.
Yeah, so bodies doesn't like
That's
Wi-Fi
funny.
doesn't go through bodies very easily. So yeah, so what we did was main the main access point was next to a window. So that meant it had to go through the window, but going through a window to line of sight to the deck was going to be a lot better than if I tucked it over next to a wall that was this thick. You know what I mean? And because Wi-Fi does not go around things; it goes
You're right.
through things. So placement is good. Now we had mentioned it with Heos too, by the way, is if you're not sure where to place your mesh networks or your access points, you could use the Heos app to help you do that. Because under the Heos app, under the help menu, there's a way that you can look at the network, and we'll make another video about that, and you can check the signal strength of the components. So what we did was we brought up the you could bring up the Denon home amp, which was the furthest away in the office, and then you could check the signal strength with that. The AVR and the M1 were hardwired directly to the router. So there was no problem with them ever getting any network connection. So worst comes number one, wire it. If you can't wire it, use um, uh, try to put the router in the best position possible to get the best coverage at the room that's furthest away. And if you have to buy either a access point, which is or um, a Wi-Fi a mesh network, that would be good. So if we're talking about access points, what you can do too is there's this. We talked about you never want to use one of these extenders, right? But what you can buy is what's called an access point. So when you type in access point for Wi-Fi, I just put one of these in my house. They look like this little cube thing. And what it does, this is the one that I just got. And what this allows you to do is this plugs into your router, and then you can mount this on the wall or on the ceiling. And then it's basically think of it as another antenna. So what this allows you to do is it's the better way. It's physically wired from the router to this box, and this box, think of it as a secondary antenna to broadcast, right? The one that we told you not to use is trying to take the wireless, process it, and then boost it again, and it doesn't work. This way works much better. You'll notice that it says PoE. PoE stands for Power over Ethernet. So a lot of routers will have that support. So all you have to do is mount this thing, and if you can get your cat wire or your Ethernet wire to it, your router will actually power this particular piece. So this is the quickest way to do it. So mesh is easier because you just take the two boxes out,
Right.
put them there, they work. Access points require a little bit more programming, you know, but it's the next best way. But it'll probably be less than a mesh network, but it does require a little bit more setup at the very beginning.
So,
I'll
Phil,
start
there's one thing
films.
that you didn't talk about
Uh-huh.
in terms of all the speaker wires. How
Uh-huh.
did you terminate them at all, or did you just put bare wire into the speaker? There's several ways of doing this.
Well, there's a couple ways you could use. So Cam, I can't remember. Did we use did we use the clip the bananas on those?
Yeah, bananas
Uh,
or spades, or just bare wire straight into the
yeah,
binding
I
posts.
think like someone's asking, Dirty Films is asking about the grease, right? If
Yeah.
you're gonna utilize the dielectric grease, you could go bare wire, couldn't you?
Yeah, so so my memory's terrible on this. Um, I'm leaning towards I think we went bare wire
I think it would bare wire
on it.
with
I brought speaker snap banana plugs under the impression that we're gonna banana plug everything and just make it really, really quick. But I'm pretty sure that I ended up going bare wire
yeah.
and just sticking the dielectric grease on the bare wire and then sticking it in there because I thought that was a better solution once I got there.
Yeah. So Dirty Films was
And for
asking about
dirty
applying.
films, to answer your question, when I did my research on the different brands of dielectric grease that I had available to me. The one that I ended up going with, can't remember the brand name. I think they were claiming it lasting up to 10 years.
Mhm.
And I can say for the kind that I used at my house personally, I've had it for at least 5 years and it still looks like it's brand new, like it hasn't degraded or anything. So for them to say 10 years, I'd say that's a good
Yeah.
claim.
Yeah. So the main thing is, as long as it's not exposed to water or,
Yeah,
you
not getting
know,
like washed out or
washed,
like
yeah,
getting hit all the
water, a
time.
lot of
Or humidity.
sunlight,
Yeah.
those types of
Yeah.
things, it should be fine. So because it was it was the speaker wires were behind this and on an awning, the odds of bringing the picture back up, because the picture was behind this and on an awning, um, the the dielectric grease is most likely going to last for years because it's not going to be exposed to wind, rain,
All right.
or even sun. So it should be by the time you should be okay.
All right.
You know, I mean, every few years go check, but I think in most
Yep.
applications, unless it's a really harsh environment, you should be 100% fine.
Yep.
So, so if we were good, so first thing was plan for your install. Look at the photographs, figure out um, what, based on the room that you're in, where are you going to put your stuff, right? The next thing is make sure that you think about all of the different things that go into this. How much wire do I need? How am I going to connect the AVR to my TV? Is the TV going to be sitting on the cabinet? Is it going to be on the wall? If it's going to be on the wall, how am I going to get the wire from the AVR up to the TV? Because I hate just seeing the wire hanging down the
Mm,
wall. If you
yeah.
could use channel, use
Ah.
some channel, or run it through the wall, find some way to kind of make it look a lot nicer. So how long of an HDMI cable I'm going to put? How am I going to hide it? Um, how much speaker wire do I need? How much subwoofer wire do I need? Am I going to run the? Do I think I can run it through the wall, or am I going to have to run it along the wall? Can I fit? That the worst thing is we actually went to Home Depot when we got there and bought multiple sizes
Oh yeah.
of stuff because it's a lot easier to return
Yep.
the size that does not work than make another trip. So what we did was we bought all the sizes. We bought the biggest
All
one,
the
the minimum one, and the small one.
Yep.
And then we took them, and when we got there and we look at the house, we said the big one. And at the end, I made one more trip back from Home Depot to return the stuff that was missing. Right?
Yep. Stuff that we didn't use.
Any other tips, Cam?
No, that's it. I think that wraps it up.
Okay. And then of course
Yeah.
Wi-Fi.
I was going to say humidity and so the weather conditions is also another factor. The fact that you're in what is it, a desert?
Yes.
You're not going to have issues with humidity, so you can discount corrosion, that sort of stuff because of humidity. So
Yeah, because I can tell you one that we had to think about too, and I had to ask was we put the subwoofer under
Sure.
the deck, right? And then under the deck was a sloped was kind of a sloped like a gradient,
Oh
like a
yeah.
sloped
Yeah.
gradient with
Kind of.
with wood, with stone covering it. And when we were doing it, I was like, do you guys get flash floods?
Right.
Because the way Arizona works
Yeah.
is there's no rain until one day there's a lot of rain, and then for another 300 days there's no rain. So when it rains, it's literally a river. So we were like, well, this is a graded thing, and if it does have that big rain, the subwoofer is water resistant. It's not
Yeah.
waterproof.
You can't be
So
underwater.
so what we did was we took some of the deck was made from uh this kind of
Like an engineered wood.
engineered wood,
Yeah.
right? The deck was made from engineered wood,
Super
and they
cool.
built the deck the same time that they just built this deck. So we took some of the engineered wood and we built a little platform to elevate the subwoofer. So just in case it did get rain under there. The subwoofer was elevated, 12 inches or 10, actually about 10 inches from there to prevent any water from getting it. The other thing you have to worry about is critters.
Mm,
I mean, because in Arizona, there's all sorts of nasty critters from
mm.
scorpions to all sorts of stuff.
I was
And,
just looking out for snakes,
yeah,
rattlesnakes.
and these subwoofers actually have a grill to protect the uh, the the port as well as the speaker itself from the critters. So we wanted to make sure that it was elevated, and then we wanted to make sure the one on the deck was elevated, and we wanted to make sure, and we knew we didn't have to worry about critters. And because it was under the deck, we didn't have to worry about sun damage either.
Right.
So that was something that we had to factor in as well. So fun project. Actually, before we go, Nick actually has. We'd like to actually introduce you to the couple that we actually worked on, and Nick actually has a short little interview that I did with them. So Nick, why don't you play that so everybody can check it out?
We don't even know how to explain how thankful and grateful we are.
Every time we're walking around, we see anything, we see the attention to detail. It's a kind of a concert hall experience as you're walking through the house and you just get the whole vibe the whole way through. It's awesome. Our favorite space is probably got to be the outdoor.
Outside on the deck, yeah.
We're still blown away. We're in shock. We're in awe.
And we're still trying to give our thanks to absolutely everybody involved that basically made this house for sure our forever home now.
So I was extremely proud to be involved. Cam and I are both ex-military veterans. Cam, how many years, Mr. Valentine?
I am a retired veteran of 22 years.
22 years, and I have 14. I have 10 years active, 4 years reserve, so 14. So being able to hang out with all of these other veterans and take care of another vet's home and see the transformation between when we first got there and when we left, with the sound systems and all of the things they did, it was really nice to know that we could do this. And it was, and by proper planning, we knew that we can get it done in the time frame. So another tip, like we said, pre-plan. I'll let you know, I literally make a little stick drawing of everything before I go to a job. I will go in and say, this will connect to this, will connect to this. And then I make sure that me and Cam can look at it to make sure that we order all of the little things that go between the boxes, right? Did we have enough 14.4? Do we have enough 14.2? Did we buy the subwoofer cables? Did we buy the ends for the subwoofer cables? Do we have enough dielectric grease? Do we have the banana plugs for the main speakers? Do we have internet Cat5 cable to go from the M1, the M4 and the receiver to the router? We thought about all of that stuff, and then that's why it showed up with a palette of things. And we, even though we planned like that, it was still a trip to Home Depot to get the things like the channels. And I think we ran out of some pieces we were using.
Well, that wasn't because we didn't plan. That was because we had to get eyes on the home to see what else we needed in addition to what we planned for.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll throw that out there.
Yeah. So if you look at the wires in the exterior here, for example, when we got there, we said, "Oh, we have enough wire, but how are we going to attach?"
We're way over.
No, it does an hour and a half.
Oh, geez.
Okay.
Never mind.
Okay.
Never mind. We're
So
still
we're
here
almost
for
done.
another 15, folks.
We're going to leave before this. But we looked at it and said, how do we run that hard wire, along that, the top of that, and hide it? So we had to go buy these little kind of nailable cable covers.
Yeah.
And you'll be amazed at how many of those you will go through.
Lots.
That was our trip to Home Depot every morning. Was we buy 200 of them, and we have to go back and get more. So, but if you look at the grand scheme of things, if you plan ahead, you're gonna have less problems. So think about wiring, Wi-Fi, um, wire management, and the size and shape of the room, and you will have success. And this is something anybody could do. There was nothing that we did that the average consumer could not do with a hammer, a drill, and a screwdriver. There's nothing that we put into that house that we could
Yeah.
not that you could not do yourself. So while you may look at these systems and you may look at the pictures of the room and the speakers throughout the house, and it seems like it's going to be this very complex thing, it's not. Anybody could do it. You just have to plan for it, and if you do that, you will be successful. All right. Anything else, Frederick, before we let him go?
Yeah, I was gonna say you've done all the installation, and then afterwards, any calibration you did, or maybe some acoustic treatments left and
Okay.
right.
So
Yeah, good.
because the
Good
house
question.
was designed by a designer, we're not going to be putting in room traps and everything else.
Could you
What
imagine?
helped with the acoustics was the room was not square. It was angles everywhere.
Yeah.
So vaulted ceiling. There was a lot of no, there was because of all the unique surfaces. The first reflections,
Yeah.
there wasn't very many. It wasn't a very even though the room was very big. No, it wasn't very echoey at all.
No,
Um,
and then she dragged in that one custom looking rug.
Yeah, and then
Right.
because it had a nice heavy rug
Yep.
and big couches, that helped a
And
lot.
the porous wood on the top that would absorb reflection.
Yeah. So it was pretty
Yeah,
good.
it was-
So we did do an Odyssey calibration. That was challenging because there's a million other people working. So while I'm trying to do this, they're trying to roll in refrigerators and tint the windows and work on the roof. So just trying to find that right window.
I was gone by this point, so I didn't see any.
So
of
what I
this.
did was
So
I
I'm
kinda
hearing all
waited.
this for the first time right now.
I kind of waited until towards the end because the service guys come in early, and I kind of waited towards the end to actually run the Odyssey, and it
Oh,
turned out pretty
man.
good. So let's look at some of the chats. What is anything else in there? Huh?
No, pretty much it. Yeah, the last one that came in was if you need to reapply the grease after a certain amount of time, but then you said 5 years, 10 years,
Yeah, and like I
so it
said,
should be good
yeah.
there.
So yeah, we did run Odyssey. I ran the one built into the AVR, and it did a really good job. And everybody hung out, and they love it. And I got a chance to talk to them after, and they're using it every day. And that's the goal, right? To make
Nice.
for them to enjoy his office and their friends and family. And now they're addicted, and they want to add other rooms like garages and stuff like that. And now I'm thinking about adding height speakers, Frederick. So now me and Cam are gonna end up going in there and adding height speakers. So I think it'd be a pretty cool video of us putting those in.
Atrium 300 idea was a great idea.
I know. I wish I had thought about that.
Right?
Actually, I don't think I thought about that.
Yeah. Didn't have the time for it then, but
We could have brought
but
producer Nick
now-
and put him on a
Right.
ladder the entire
Right.
time and had him hang them.
No, that's a great idea.
That's a
for
great
that
idea.
spot. That's thinking outside the box right there.
Oh, it would have been
Yeah.
beautiful. But
Yeah.
all right. So thank everybody for coming. In the US, the military makeover video is available. We'll make sure that we put the link in because I think it's on their website, and they're actually broadcasting it on TV, so you can see the whole process, and you can see all of the different manufacturers and partners, including us. And I have an interview with the hosts on there as well. And then we'll make sure if we can find a version that we could share with those who are outside of the US, so you could check out the episode as well. So, but we just want to show you that, just talk a little bit about it, and just stress that anybody can do this. Meet Cam and a ladder, a screwdriver, and some drills, and a little bit of elbow grease. You can get a lot of stuff done.
And some wire strippers.
And a lot of wires and wire strippers. Make sure you have wire strippers. All right. So thanks everybody for coming. Frederick, thank you again.
And also, so we keep on saying military makeover, but Phil, is military makeover with who?
Oh, Montel Williams. So if you're like an American, he's like a celebrity talk show host, and he's an ex-submariner.
And that's what I
just
was
like
going to
me.
lead into.
I'm a submariner. He's a retired submariner. So it's kind of cool to actually do that as well. We have just put up. Nick has just put up our calendar for. Or we will be putting up our calendar of other events. This was more casual today, but we're going to really try to dive into things a little bit more detailed. I think the next one's going to be on AVR setup. So we're going to literally take an AVR, take it out of the box, and walk through the entire process. I think we'll probably end up having to do that one in the theater. So we'll talk about how do you set it up? How do you set the speaker levels? How do you determine what if I want to use the internal? What if I want to use the external setup? And we will walk you through all the processes and give you all the tips and tricks to optimize a Denon or Marantz AVR. In the future, we'll be doing things like subwoofer placement, speaker placement, acoustic treatments, and things like that. So today we were just talking about, we put subwoofers in. Later, we're going to talk about how we pick the spots for the subwoofers. And that's a whole nother conversation. All right. So make sure that you notify, so you are made aware of each of these upcoming sessions. And if you haven't, like and subscribe, please make sure you do so. All right. So thank you, everyone. And Frederick, thank you for coming. Cam, thank you for hanging out late. Nick, thank you for being behind the scenes. And we will talk to you soon.